Bet you all haven't seen too many Ford LSD rear ends on a Dodge. Welcome to the nightclub, guys. It's your host, Night Wrencher. Now, these last couple weeks, I've actually been spending my time installing a Ford 8.8 LSD Explorer rear end, 31 spline, 373 gears. I don't know how many times I've said that throughout the week, but I've said that quite often. I spent the last 2 weeks basically installing the rear end on this Dodge pickup. It's a 75 Dodge D100. I've made a couple other videos on it, but I haven't actually taken the time to make a complete build video on this. Basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the rear end out of this little guy and installing a Ford rear end because I am so tired of peg legging up and down my dirt driveway, and if I'm going to peel out, it's going to look cool with two wheels. I started off the swap by disconnecting the rear e-brake cables and installing a set of smaller wheels so it's easier for me to roll the axle out from under the vehicle. The U-bolts on this truck were just so rusted out that I wasn't able to pull them off with an impact, and I ended up having to cut them off with a grinder. What can you expect from a vehicle that's about 30 or almost 40 years old? The differential that's currently on the truck is a Dana 60. I believe this one had 323 gears and it was an open differential, so it was just annoying trying to drive that thing around my house. The new differential, like I said, is an Posi-Track unit with 373 gears. It does have the factory Ford LSD, also has the same bolt pattern for the wheels as my Dodge differential. The big plus is that it actually has rear discs and everything's pretty much brand new. It's not almost 40 plus years old. Most of the first things that you end up having to do is a lot of measuring. The more you measure up front before you even start anything, the better off you're going to be. Another smart thing you can do is to actually replace the diff cover gasket along with the pinion seal. That way you save yourself a little bit of time down the road. I just spent the entire first day pretty much measuring the axles, measuring the difference in the leaf springs, figuring out where the new pads are going to be, and just taking my time, making sure I get everything ready to go. To make it easy for me during dry fitting, I ordered myself a set of spring perches online from Summit Racing for about 25 bucks. I did have to make the center hole a little bit bigger. I believe the hole was 5/8 or 9/16 to make the factory blocks fit, but overall it actually made it really easy for me to not only measure everything out the way I needed it to, but also assist me in holding the axle together while I made sure all my measurements were correct. Like I said before, take your time while you're measuring, because any little mistake that you make now is going to bite you in the butt down the road. Now the last thing I did was actually set the pinion angle. Right before I decided to tack it, I decided to set it right around the stock location that the Explorer has it, and then I just tacked it once on each side just so I can roll the thing out and fully weld the axle completely and not have the truck be in my way. And like I said, I do urge you guys to measure multiple times before you actually decide to assemble everything. And the reason I decided to tack it in the first place was breaking off 4 tack welds is much easier than breaking off 4 beads. The rest of the build was actually pretty straightforward. It was a matter of just welding the spring perches to the axle tubes where I had first spot welded them together, and then just flashing on a nice coat of black paint to prevent it from rusting as I continued working on it. I don't doubt that later on I'm going to have it covered in oil and it's not going to look very pretty, so I wasn't too concerned with the actual quality of the paint. Cutting off the existing spring perches is pretty standard on most builds. I don't really know many other builds that choose not to, unless you had a build that the existing perch wasn't going to be getting in the way of what you're currently building. But in my case, I really had to eliminate at least half of it, because the way the U-bolts bolt up to my leaf springs, they have to travel through that bottom section, and I won't be able to get it put back together unless I actually remove that. After taking care of all that, it was just a matter of welding up the inside of the perches and tying them to the outside, just for a little bit of extra protection. And once all that was out of the way, it was time for final fit up. Unfortunately, I was unable to reuse the stock blocks like I planned, but that's simply because of the nature of the factory Ford U-bolts. I am planning on buying brand new bolts that are able to extend far beyond the leaf spring, but until that day comes, I'm going to be temporarily fitting them up with the Ford U-bolts and factory Ford shock mount. Finally, it was time to cut out my old two-piece drive shaft and start preparations to have myself a one-piece drive shaft made in its place. The two-piece drive shaft was off the original Dodge 2500 that I used to pull the NV3500 that's inside the truck right now. But because I'm going to be opting for a one-piece drive shaft, I have no need for a two-piece drive shaft right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to install one end of the drive shaft onto the transmission and the other shaft goes onto the differential, butting them up together and installing a temporary drive shaft that I'm going to take to an actual shop to have them refabricated and rebalanced. Overall, everything else is pretty temporary. I was lucky that the factory brake lines on the Ford differential were able to fit up to the factory lines on the Dodge chassis, and everything else is pretty straightforward. I hope this video is able to help someone with this swap in the future. Any questions, feel free to write them down below. I'm always replying to all the comments. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I will see you guys all in the next one. Night Wrencher out.